My name is Alex Tanaka, and I've been a city parks employee for the city and county of Honolulu for the past 8 years. I work at the Byodo In Temple in the valley of the temple's Memorial Park on the windward side of Oahu. It's not your typical park gig, mowing lawns in a neighborhood green space or picking up trash after picnickers. No, this place is something else entirely. It's a replica of an ancient Japanese temple, nestled at the base of the jagged Kewalo Mountains, surrounded by lush gardens, koi ponds, and peacocks that strut around like they own the place. The temple itself is stunning. Red lacquered wood, curved tile roofs, a massive bronze bell you can ring for good luck, and inside a 9-foot golden Buddha that stares out with eternal calm. But here's the thing most visitors don't know, or maybe they sense it but don't dwell on it. This land wasn't always a peaceful memorial park. Back during World War II, when anti-Japanese sentiment was at its peak after Pearl Harbor, this valley served as a makeshift graveyard for Japanese Americans who died in the internment camps or from the hardships of the war years. Hundreds were buried here hastily, without proper rites, their graves unmarked to avoid drawing attention. After the war, the bodies were supposedly exhumed and relocated, and in 1968, the Byodo In Temple was built as a symbol of reconciliation, commemorating the centennial of Japanese immigration to Hawaii. The gardens were landscaped over the old burial grounds, turning sorrow into serenity. Or so the official story goes. I work the second shift, from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., which means I handle the afternoon crowds, the evening closures, and the quiet hours when the sun dips behind the mountains and the shadows stretch long. It's during those twilight times that the place starts to feel different. I've always been sensitive to atmospheres. My grandmother used to say I had a bit of the second sight from her Okinawan side. At first, I chalked up the odd feelings to fatigue or the isolation. But over the years, the buildup has been slow, insidious, like mist creeping in from the ocean. Little things at first, then bigger, until I can't deny it anymore. This garden is haunted by its past. Let me take you through it, day by day, shift by shift, as it's unfolded for me. Maybe writing it down will make sense of it all. Or maybe it'll just confirm I'm losing my mind. It started innocently enough, about 3 years into the job. My routine was solid. Arrive at 2, check the grounds for any overnight debris, fallen branches from the trade winds, peacock feathers scattered like confetti. Then patrol the paths, make sure the koi fish are fed, and keep an eye on visitors ringing the bon show bell too enthusiastically. By 5 p.m., the crowds thin out as the tour buses head back to Waikiki. That's when I do maintenance. Trim the bonsai trees, rake the Zen gardens into perfect patterns, water the azaleas and camellias that bloom in vibrant pinks and whites. One afternoon in late spring, as the sun was starting its descent, I was raking the gravel near the meditation pavilion. The air was heavy with the scent of plumeria, and the only sounds were the distant coos of doves and the trickle of water from the sacred pond. I felt a chill, unusual for Hawaii's balmy weather. Glancing up, I saw a flicker in the corner of my eye, a shadow moving between the bamboo groves. I turned, but nothing was there, just the wind rustling the leaves, I told myself. But as I resumed raking, I heard it, a faint whisper, like silk brushing against stone. It sounded like Japanese words, soft and mournful. Kaeru, kaeru. Return, return. I froze, rake in hand. I'm half Japanese myself, raised on my mother's stories and a smattering of the language from Saturday school. But this wasn't a tourist or a coworker pranking me. The park was empty. I shook it off, finished my shift, and went home to my small apartment in Kaneohe, where I live alone with a cat named Miko. That night, dreams came. Blurred faces in black and white, people in tattered clothes digging shallow graves under rainy skies. The next day, I mentioned it casually to my supervisor, Mr. Lee, a grizzled Korean war vet who's been with the Parks Department forever. "Ghosts? In the temple?" He laughed, slapping my back. "Boy, every old place in Hawaii has stories. This was a cemetery long before the temple, Polynesian burial grounds, then the Japanese during the war. But don't let it spook you. Just ring the bell if you feel uneasy. It's supposed to ward off evil spirits." I nodded, but his words stuck. I started researching on my breaks, using my phone to dig into the history. Official records were sparse. World War II archives mentioned internment camps on the islands, where over 1,000 Japanese were held. Some died from illness, others from despair. Bodies were buried in remote spots to prevent sympathy gatherings. The Valley of the Temples fit the bill: isolated, misty, forgotten. By the 1950s, developers turned it into a memorial park, exhuming what they could find. But whispers in local forums suggested not all were recovered. Bones turned up during construction of the temple, hastily reburied or ignored. That knowledge changed things. During my shifts, the whispers became more frequent, always in the evenings as the light faded. Not just Kairu, but names: Hiroshi, Akiko, fragments of lives lost. I'd be cleaning the footbridge over the pond, and the water would ripple without wind, reflecting faces that weren't mine, pale, hollow-eyed, in wartime attire. One evening, about a month after the first incident, I was locking up the gift shop when I saw her. A woman in a faded yukata, standing by the Amida Buddha statue inside the temple hall. She was translucent, like heat haze over asphalt, her hair pinned up in a style from the 1940s. She turned toward me, eyes dark pools of sorrow, and reached out a hand. My heart hammered. I dropped the keys and bolted for the exit. When I looked back, she was gone. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I burned incense at my home altar, praying to my ancestors for protection. The build-up continued. Peacocks would scream unnaturally at dusk, their cries echoing like human wails. Lanterns along the paths flickered on without electricity. Once, while pruning hedges near the columbarium, where ashes are interred in niches, I found fresh offerings: wilted chrysanthemums and rice balls placed where no visitor had been. The air grew colder in spots, pockets of frost in tropical heat. I confided in a coworker, Lena, who works mornings. She's native Hawaiian, full of kapu knowledge. "The land remembers," she said. "Those spirits are yurei, restless ghosts. They were buried without proper oban rites, no lanterns to guide them home. Your second shift is when the veil thins, between day and night. Be careful, they might want something from you." What could they want? Redemption? Acknowledgement? I started leaving small offerings myself. Sake poured into the earth, paper lanterns floated on the pond at closing time. It seemed to help at first. The whispers softened, the shadows receded. But then came the visions, vivid and unrelenting. One stormy evening, as thunder rumbled over the mountains, I was sheltering in the bell house. The rain pounded the roof like drumbeats. Suddenly, the air shimmered, and I was no longer alone. Ghosts materialized. Men in internment camp uniforms, women clutching children, their forms flickering like old film reels. They surrounded me, murmuring stories. "We died in the camps," one said, his voice echoing in my mind. "Fever took us, buried here in secret, forgotten." Another, an old man. "My family was stripped of everything, farm, home. I hanged myself in despair." The woman I'd seen before. "I was pregnant. The stress killed us both." I fell to my knees, overwhelmed. They weren't malevolent, they were trapped, their spirits tied to the soil beneath the gardens. The temple's construction had disturbed them, but also offered a bridge, a place of peace that could release them if honored properly. That night in the bell house, surrounded by the flickering apparitions of the dead, marked a turning point in my life. A fracture in the mundane routine I'd built as a city parks employee. The rain had ceased its relentless assault on the roof, leaving behind a dripping symphony that echoed the murmurs of the ghosts. I stumbled out into the misty dawn, my uniform soaked not just from the storm, but from a cold sweat that clung to me like a second skin. The gardens, usually a place of serene beauty, now felt layered with grime. The paths slick with mud that squelched underfoot, revealing pockets of decayed leaves and forgotten detritus from years past. The air smelled of wet earth and something sharper, like rust and regret. I drove home in a daze, the Kolau Mountains looming like silent sentinels, and collapsed into bed, but sleep brought no respite. Dreams replayed the visions, faces etched with suffering, bodies emaciated from fever and despair, buried in hasty pits beneath what was now manicured lawn. By morning, resolve had hardened in me like cooled lava. I couldn't ignore it anymore. These yurei, as Lena called them, weren't random hauntings. They were echoes of a buried history, demanding to be unearthed. Japanese Americans in Hawaii during World War II hadn't suffered the mass internment of the mainland, where over 120,000 were uprooted, but the islands had their own shadows. After Pearl Harbor, martial law gripped Hawaii, and over 2,000 Japanese, mostly community leaders, priests, fishermen suspected of espionage, were arrested within days. They were shuttled to camps like Honolulu, dubbed Hell Valley, a remote gulch where barracks sweltered under barbed wire. Some died there, from dysentery, heart attacks born of stress, suicides in the dead of night. Bodies were buried quietly, often in unmarked graves to avoid unrest. And this valley, the Valley of the Temples, with its misty folds and isolation, had whispered rumors of serving as one such site before its transformation into a memorial park in the 1960s. The Byodo-InTemple, built in 1968 to honor the centennial of Japanese immigration, sat atop it all like a beautiful bandage over an unhealed wound. I decided then, a memorial plaque, something simple, etched with acknowledgement of those World War II burials to give the spirits the rights they craved. Obon tradition spoke of this, honoring ancestors with lanterns and offerings to guide them home. Without it, yurei lingered, bound by resentment. But advocating for change in a bureaucracy like the city and county of Honolulu was no small feat. I started with Mr. Lee, my supervisor, cornering him in the staff shed the next morning. The shed was a grimy haven. Tools caked with dried soil, shelves lined with rusty cans of pesticide, the air thick with the musty scent of old rubber boots and fertilizer bags split at the seams. Mr. Lee, we need to recognize the history here, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. A plaque for the Japanese buried during the war. It's the right thing. He looked up from his clipboard, his weathered face creasing in skepticism. A Korean war vet with a no-nonsense demeanor, he'd seen his share of ghosts, literal and figurative, but he dismissed mine with a grunt. Tanaka, you're letting stories get to you. This is a park, not a museum. Budgets are tight. Tourists come for the peace, not the pain. Drop it. Conflict ignited immediately. Internally, doubt gnawed. Was I risking my job over hallucinations? Externally, Mr. Lee's resistance built tension, his warnings about stirring up trouble hanging like storm clouds. But the emotional resonance of that night's visions propelled me. Those ghosts weren't abstract. They were people like my ancestors, immigrants who toiled on sugar plantations, only to face suspicion in wartime. I felt their despair in my bones, a hereditary ache. Undeterred, I began gathering petitions on my off hours. I reached out to locals through community forums and the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii, which had resources on the internment era. One evening, after shift, I met with descendants at a small gathering in Kaneohe. The room was dimly lit, folding chairs arranged in a circle, the air heavy with the scent of green tea and incense. Mrs. Nakamura, an elderly woman with hands gnarled from years of farm work, shared her father's story. Arrested as a Buddhist priest, detained at Honolulu, where he succumbed to pneumonia in a dirt-floored barrack. No proper funeral, she whispered, tears tracing wrinkles. Just vanished. Her words built emotional layers, resonating with my own family's silences, my grandmother's refusal to speak of her brother, Hiroshi, lost during the war. As I collected signatures, dozens, then hundreds, the supernatural events escalated, a grim buildup that tested my resolve. It started subtly, grime manifesting in unnatural ways. One twilight shift, as I raked the Zen garden, the gravel seemed to shift underfoot, revealing clumps of dark soil that smelled of decay, as if freshly turned from deep below. Whispers returned, not faint but insistent, carrying names and fragments. Issei, Nisei, betrayed. The peacocks, usually vibrant, now appeared mangy, their feathers matted with inexplicable slime, screeching wails that mimicked cries from the camps, echoes of guards' orders or internees' laments. Then came the moving objects. I was trimming bonsai near the meditation pavilion when my clippers jerked from my grasp, flying across the path to embed in a bamboo stalk with a crack like breaking bone. I stared, heart racing, as the tool dripped with a viscous ooze, grimy and cold. Whispers returned, not faint but insistent, carrying names and fragments. Issei, Nisei, betrayed. The peacocks, usually vibrant, now appeared mangy, their feathers matted with inexplicable slime, screeching wails that mimicked cries from the camps, echoes of guards' orders or internees' laments. Then came the moving objects. I was trimming bonsai near the meditation pavilion when my clippers jerked from my grasp, flying across the path to embed in a bamboo stalk with a crack like breaking bone. I stared, heart racing, as the tool dripped with a viscous ooze, grimy and cold. Tension mounted. Was this anger from the spirits, frustrated by my slow progress, or a plea for haste? That night, alone in my apartment, I pored over archives online, piecing stories. A fisherman named Kato, detained for his boat's radio, who hanged himself in despair. A mother, Akiko, who lost her child to malnutrition in the camps. Their pain resonated, mirroring my growing isolation. Friends dismissed my ghost stories, and even Miko, my cat, hissed at unseen corners. The buildup intensified with the ponds. One humid evening, as shadows lengthened, the sacred pond erupted in frenzy. The koi, normally languid, thrashed wildly, scales flashing in turmoil, water boiling as if heated from below. Bubbles rose, carrying a foul stench of rot, decaying flesh perhaps, from long buried remains. I approached, flashlight beam cutting through the dusk, and saw shapes in the ripples, faces pressing upward, mouths open in silent screams. Grime coated the banks, a slimy residue that clung to my boots, pulling like hands from the grave. Emotional waves crashed, fear mixed with pity, tension coiling as I wondered if ignoring them would invite worse. Conflict peaked with Mr. Lee. He caught me leaving offerings, sake and rice, near the columbarium. "This ain't your personal shrine, Tanaka," he barked, his face reddening. "You're on thin ice." The external pressure amplified my internal turmoil. Quit and flee, or persist and risk everything? Lena offered solace during handovers, her kapu wisdom a balm. The Aina, the land, holds grudges. Honor them, or they'll drag you down. Her stories of Hawaiian night marchers paralleled the Yurei, building resonance. Spirits unbound by improper burial, wandering in white burial kimono, feet hovering above ground. Then the ghost child appeared, a pivotal escalation that shattered my doubts. It was a muggy night, trade winds absent, the air stagnant with the grime of impending rain. I was sweeping the back path behind the temple, broom bristles scraping against gravel embedded with bits of bone-white shell, remnants perhaps of older graves. A gentle tug at my sleeve stopped me cold. I looked down, and there he was. A boy of about 5, his form translucent, dressed in ragged shorts and a shirt stained with mud and what looked like dried blood. His hair was disheveled, face smudged with grime. Eyes large and luminous, filled with a child's innocent plea mixed with ancient sorrow. Yurei lore flashed in my mind, ubume, mother ghosts, or gaki, hungry spirits. But this was a child, perhaps one who died in the camps from illness or neglect. My breath hitched, tension electric, as he didn't speak, just pulled insistently, his touch icy through my shirt. I followed, heart pounding, into the overgrown thicket behind the temple, a spot rarely tended, tangled with vines and ferns dripping with moisture. Grime enveloped us, the ground soft and sucking, like walking on a sponge soaked in decay. He pointed to a spot, then faded, leaving me alone with the rustle of leaves. Kneeling, I dug with bare hands, nails filling with black earth that reeked of mildew and something metallic. Inches down, my fingers hit metal, a rusted locket, its chain corroded, surface pitted with age. Inside, a faded sepia photo. A family posed stiffly, dated 1943. The boy was there, smiling faintly beside a man resembling my grandfather. Emotional resonance surged. This wasn't random. Was this connected to my lineage? That discovery fueled my advocacy, but the hauntings grew grimmer. Winds howled names at dusk, carrying dust and debris that coated everything in a fine, gritty layer. Apparitions blocked paths, their forms more solid. Women with long, disheveled hair obscuring faces, dressed in white funeral robes, feet not touching the ground, a classic Yurei trait. One nearly touched me, her hand extending with nails blackened by grave dirt, whispering, "Musume, daughter." Tension built to paranoia. I jumped at shadows, slept with lights on, conflicted between empathy and terror. As Obon season approached, mid-August, the festival for honoring the dead, the build-up reached fever pitch. Obon traditions rooted in Buddhist lore, welcoming spirits with mukaebi, offering food on altars, dancing bonodori to celebrate, then sending them off with okuribi or toronagashi. In Japan, it's a time when the veil thins, yurei returning home. Here, in this haunted garden, it felt like a powder keg. I defied park policy, working late to prepare. I cleaned graves, symbolic spots where disturbances were strongest, with salt water, leaving cucumbers and eggplants carved as spirit horses for the dead to ride. Mr. Lee warned me via text, "You're suspended if caught." Conflict raged, but the spirit's urgency overrode fear. As the veil between worlds thinned during the Forsaken Week of Obon, the Honouliuli Valley Gardens transformed into a labyrinth of malevolence, where the living were mere pawns in a game orchestrated by the vengeful dead. I, Tanaka Kenji, had taken the second-shift groundskeeper job out of desperation, bills piling up like autumn leaves, my mother's cryptic warnings about our family's cursed roots dismissed as senile ramblings. The valley, nestled in Oahu's shadowed folds, was once a site of unspeakable atrocities during World War II. Honouliuli internment camp, where Japanese Americans like my ancestors were herded like cattle, starved, tortured, and left to rot in unmarked graves. The city had sanitized it into a botanical paradise, complete with koi guns, manicured paths, and a towering Buddha statue that loomed like a silent judge. But beneath the veneer of serenity lurked a festering rot, a nefarious undercurrent that whispered promises of doom to anyone who lingered after dusk. My first inkling of the valley's dark heart came on the eve of Obon, that ancient festival when the spirits of the departed slither back to the mortal realm, hungry for acknowledgement or revenge. Mr. Lee, the grizzled park manager with his perpetual scowl and pockets lined by developers' bribes, had grumbled about superstitious nonsense when I suggested honoring the old traditions. "Light your damn lanterns if you must, Tanaka, but don't scare off the tourists with your ghost stories," he'd snarled, his eyes darting nervously to the Buddha statue as if it held secrets he dared not voice. Little did I know, Lee's reluctance stemmed from his own tainted bloodline. Descendants of camp guards who had profited from the suffering, burying evidence in the very soil we tended. The gardens were his cash cow, a facade hiding potential real estate gold, but the spirits had other plans, weaving a web of deceit and horror that would ensnare us all. That first night, as twilight bled into inky blackness, I arranged the Chochin lanterns along the winding paths, their fragile paper skins glowing with an unnatural luminescence. No breeze stirred the humid air, yet the flames danced erratically, casting elongated shadows that twisted like serpents. I felt watched, a prickling sensation on my neck, as if invisible fingers traced my spine. Dismissing it as fatigue, I patrolled the grounds, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. That's when the grime began, subtle at first, a slick film on the stone benches, like oil seeping from the earth. By morning it had escalated, paths caked in spectral mud that reeked of decay, ponds churning with murky detritus that bubbled like boiling tar. Peacocks, usually strutting arrogantly, huddled in terror, their cries echoing like tormented souls. The petitions started arriving anonymously, slipped under the maintenance shed door, faded letters from descendants pleading for a monument to the interred, names scrawled in trembling script: Kato Hiroshi, Nakamura Akiko, Yamamoto Taro. I archived them meticulously in my notebook, piecing together fragmented histories from online forums and dusty library tomes. But as Oban progressed, the supernatural incursions grew more insidious. Whispers slithered through the bamboo groves, not benign pleas, but venomous accusations. Traitor, murderer, forgotten us, and pay the price. One evening, as I pruned the azaleas, a chill wind whipped up, carrying the acrid stench of fever sweat and despair. Shadows coalesced at the periphery of my vision, fleeting glimpses of emaciated figures in tattered uniforms, their eyes hollow pits of rage. By the second night, the nefarious demeanor of the hauntings revealed itself in full malice. I awoke in my tiny caretaker's cottage to scratching at the door, like nails raking wood. Venturing out, I found the gardens alive with unholy energy. The koi in the ponds thrashed wildly, their scales peeling away to reveal bony skeletons beneath, as if the water itself corroded life. Grime now coated everything. Leaves wilted under a layer of ethereal filth. Statues wept black ichor that stained the ground. And then the first apparition manifested fully, a woman in a blood-stained yukata, her hair writhing like living tendrils, face obscured by a veil of shadow. She hovered near the Buddha statue, which pulsed with a sickly golden light, not benevolent, but throbbing like an infected wound. "You tread on our bones," she hissed, her voice a cacophony of wind through cracked bamboo and distant screams. "Ignore us, and we will drag you into the abyss." Terror gripped me, but curiosity and a nagging familial pull compelled me to delve deeper. I spent days researching in secret, evading Lee's suspicious glares. The archives unveiled horrors. Honolulu wasn't just an internment camp. It was a den of covert experiments, where guards like Lee's forebears tested biological agents on prisoners, inducing fevers that melted flesh from bone. Petitions multiplied, each one laced with curses. "May the grime consume the living as it did us." Spirits began targeting me personally, objects hurled by invisible hands, mirrors shattering to reveal grotesque reflections of my own face decaying. One night, a spectral hand clutched my ankle as I crossed a bridge, pulling me toward the pond's depths, where drowned faces leered up hungrily. As Oban's final night approached, the valley's malevolence peaked. The air hummed with unseen energy, charged like a storm about to unleash hell. I prepared meticulously, setting more lanterns, their flickering lights now revealing glimpses of the gathering horde. Spirits materialized slowly at first, shadowy wisps solidifying into tormented forms. Then in a torrent. Dozens, hundreds, a spectral army filling the gardens with a frost that crystallized my breath into jagged shards. Men in ragged uniforms, bearing whip scars and bullet wounds. Women clutching ghostly infants that wailed eternally. Elders bent under invisible chains, their bodies twisted by years of buried agony. The grime surged, transforming the paths into quagmires of sucking mud that whispered temptations. "Join us. End the pain." They encircled me in a tightening noose of translucent figures, their eyes not pleading, but burning with accusatory fire. The yukata woman glided forward, her form sharpening into terrifying clarity, skin pallid as death, lips curled in a predatory smile, hair undulating like venomous snakes. "You see us now," she intoned, her voice a sinister symphony of rustling leaves and cracking bones. "But seeing is not enough. Speak our names, or we will claim yours. Let us go, or drag you with us into eternal torment." My hands trembled as I fumbled for my notebook, pages crammed with names scavenged from archives, stories stitched from the petition's poisoned threads. Kato Hiroshi. The name evoked a vision. A young man, falsely accused of espionage, beaten until his ribs splintered, buried alive in a shallow grave where roots pierced his corpse. The spirit shuddered, its form flickering with rage before emitting a guttural howl. Nakamura Akiko. A woman who poisoned herself and her child to escape the guards' depravities, her ghost now exhaling toxic fumes that burned my lungs. Yamamoto Taro. An elder who orchestrated a failed rebellion, his followers executed in front of him, their blood soaking the earth that now birthed this grime. With each utterance, the air thickened with nefarious revelations. Dark deeds not just suffered, but inflicted. Some spirits had turned on each other in desperation, betraying kin for scraps of food, their guilt manifesting as chains that bound them to this plane. The circle tightened, cold fingers brushing my skin, promising oblivion. Then, Tanaka Hiroshi, my surname, a dagger to the heart. The world tilted as realization crashed like a tidal wave of dread. This was my great-uncle, the family phantom Grandma had erased from tales, my mother's evasive glances now making sinister sense. Arrested as a teacher suspected of sedition, he hadn't merely died of fever in Honolulu. Archives hinted at darker truths. He'd been a collaborator, feeding information to guards for privileges, betraying fellow internees to their deaths. The empty album spots, the hushed whispers. Our bloodline was tainted with treachery, the grime a metaphor for our inherited filth. Tears streamed down my face, not just catharsis, but a torrent of inherited guilt, as visions assaulted me. Hiroshi's fevered betrayal, signing confessions that doomed dozens, his body dumped in the valley's depths, cursed to wander. The spirits roared in unison, their forms warping into nightmarish amalgamations, limbs elongating, faces melting into masks of fury. "Traitor's kin!" they chanted, the yukata woman lunging forward, her nails raking ethereal gashes across my chest. Pain seared, real and unrelenting, as the grime rose like tendrils, coiling around my legs, pulling me down. In desperation, I chanted ancient prayers, my voice cracking against the cacophony. Seizing the Bansho bell, I rang it in frantic peals, each strike vibrating the ground like an earthquake of reckoning. The Buddha statue blazed with infernal light, not purifying, but amplifying the chaos, as if awakening a deeper evil. The spirits shimmered, but not in assent, their forms convulsed, twisting in agony, the air filling with screams that shredded the night. Then, the turning point. As the bell's echoes faded, the yukata woman paused, her malevolent gaze softening into something akin to pity or triumph. "You have spoken," she whispered, "but freedom comes at a cost." The horde began to dissolve, not into gentle fireflies, but into swirling vortices of light that scorched the earth, lifting the grime in a whirlwind of purification laced with vengeance. The air cleared, a deceptive calm descending like the eye of a hurricane. In the aftermath, the city, bombarded by petitions now amplified by anonymous leaks, approved the monument, a monolithic stone etched with names, unveiled amid a gathering of descendants. Mr. Li, his face ashen, relented without a fight, muttering about bad omens as he signed away development rights. Rumors swirled. He'd been visited in dreams by the yukata woman, forced to confront his ancestors' sins, his grumbling a mask for terror. The gardens quieted, no whispers, no shadows, just peacocks cooing in eerie harmony. I continued my second shift, tending the grounds with a renewed, obsessive purpose, the scars on my chest a constant reminder. But the profound lesson the supernatural buildup imparted was laced with nefarious irony. Places hold echoes, yes, but honoring them doesn't always set them free. It binds the living in chains of memory. My connection to Hiroshi wasn't mere guardianship, it was a curse, a symbiotic tether. For in the monument's shadow, I began to notice changes. My reflection in ponds rippling with grime only I could see, whispers calling my name at midnight, the yukata woman's voice murmuring, "Soon you will join us fully." The amazing ending came not in resolution, but in revelation. One moonless night, as I rang the bansho for old time's sake, the Buddha statue cracked open, revealing a hidden chamber beneath. Artifacts from the camp, including Hiroshi's confession ledger, stained with blood. Flipping through, I found the final entry. Not Hiroshi's hand, but my own name, scrawled in future ink, dated years hence. The spirits hadn't ascended, they'd infiltrated, waiting for the monument to serve as their anchor. Mr. Li appeared then, not as foe, but ally in damnation, his eyes glowing with spectral light. "We built this together," he confessed, "your blood and mine, to summon the ultimate vengeance." In that moment the valley erupted, grime surging like a tidal wave. Spirits reforming not as victims, but conquerors, led by the yukata woman who revealed her true form, an Oni queen, born from the camp's collective rage. But the twist, the amazing crescendo, I didn't flee. Power coursed through me, Hiroshi's betrayal merging with my resolve, transforming me into their vessel. With a roar that shook the islands, I commanded the horde, turning the gardens into a fortress of the forgotten. The city fell silent, developers vanished, and Honolulu became a sanctuary of dark justice, where the living atoned eternally, and I, eternal guardian, ruled the echoes with nefarious grace. Freedom wasn't release. It was dominion, an empire of shadows where the past devoured the present forever.